Housing has been a serious problem for many in this country. There's a serious housing backlog. But those who have managed to build their homes, some have built them on wetlands, some have built structures that have been later called illegal structures, and they have been demolished. They have been left homeless. Now, this is an issue that sits on the hearts of many Zimbabweans. It's a dream to own a house in Harare. It's a dream to be a landlord. And for anyone who goes to work, the working class, it is a dream to leave a home for their own children. But some of the times, those dreams come crashing down as government, at times, have brought down amazing, beautiful structures. Some built on wetlands, some built on illegally allocated homes. Now, in proud partnership with the Community Alliance for Human Settlements in Zimbabwe, we discuss the issue around zero tolerance on environmental crimes and the specter of informal structured demolitions in Harare Metropolitan Province. Before I bring you back to the studio, I have the opportunity to speak to the Minister of Higher and Tertiary Education, who has been working with the Ministry of Local Government to map wetlands, to ensure that wetlands are protected in Zimbabwe, and to ensure that those who have been illegally settled and have built their homes and structures on illegal grounds are taken care of. Now, let's just take a listen to what the Minister of Higher and Tertiary Education, Minister Amon Murira, had to say, and the Minister of ICT, who is currently the acting government spokesperson, Jenfen Muswera, spoke about the issue of land barons and illegal settlements.
The first question relates to the wetlands in terms of infrastructure that is being built on wetlands. As I've indicated, that a government is in a position to handle issues related to infrastructure that has been developed around wetlands. And the first response, because this is a practical government focusing on ensuring that we deliver empirically, that is precisely why a committee has been developed focusing in particular on emergency preparedness and disaster management program. So a program has been put in place comprising an interministerial committee focusing on ensuring that there won't be any construction on wetlands, number one. Number two, that there is also the development of alternative accommodation for people that have built in wetlands areas and have been affected mainly by the rainy season. And the third aspect being the relocation to safer sites. But at the same time, I also allow the Minister of Higher and Tertiary Education to expand on that, because also the mapping and the spatial planning is also involves ZINCSA, which is also under the Ministry of Higher and Tertiary Education, Innovation, Science and Technology. Honorable Professor Murwera, if you can also expand on that.
The issue basically around wetlands is the issue of the country's water security, because they are a very important source of water. But at the same time, they're a source of danger for those ones who settle on them. So the policy was, first of all, to map out these wetlands, and they were mapped out, I think, in 3 months of last year, and they were adopted by Cabinet sometime in June last year. It therefore means we now have knowledge of those who are settled on the wetlands, and we have now knowledge of those people who are not settled on the wetlands. We also now have knowledge of people who are illegally settled on those wetlands and who with the other people who have helped them to settle on those wetlands. The next question is, what are the legal remedies to this? The legal remedies are according to the Environmental Management Act, and I think in terms of the law, there are certain things that have to happen. But as to what kind of punishment, it becomes very legalistic. But the policy which we are announcing basically is that it's not in the national interest to be on the wetlands, and we have mapped out those wetlands, and people should not be on those wetlands. And all those people who might have been cheated to be on those wetlands, the government will then intervene, and the whole thing is to make sure that everything is done for everyone's safety, but most of all for the country's proper environmental management for the benefit of this generation and the generations to come.
Thank you very much for joining us on this, The Situation Right Now, with me, your host, Dara B. Mhlanga, in proud partnership with the Community Alliance for Human Settlements in Zimbabwe. Now, this afternoon, we're going to be discussing about the issues that I've already outlined for you, unpacking zero tolerance on environmental crimes and the spectre of informal structure demolitions in Harare Metropolitan. Now, to help me discuss this, I have my partners from the Community Alliance for Human Settlements in Zimbabwe, Admire, and also the Mayor of Harare, Jacob Mafume. And we're going to be going deep into detail with these issues, and we're also going to be discussing the comments from the Minister of Higher and Tertiary Education and the acting government spokesperson, Jenfen Mswera. But before we do that, I'll allow Admire to just kindly introduce himself and the organization that is partnering us this afternoon so that we can discuss why they exist and their interests. Admire.
Thank you very much, Blessed. Thank you very much, listeners. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Admire Mtize. I work as the Research and Advocacy Officer for the Community Alliance for Human Settlements in Zimbabwe. We are a membership-driven organization working with communities whose land rights are threatened, or communities who lack secure tenure or lack access to land. Communities like peri-urban informal settlements established illegally on the outskirts of cities, and also indigenous communities whose rights are threatened with displacement through development-induced displacements. We are talking of communities like the community in Chilonga, Chiredzi, which is threatened with displacement for a large agribusiness, which will be farming lucerne. We also work with communities who lack access to land, people who are landless. There's huge land hunger in Zimbabwe. I can recall that the Minister of Agriculture said the waiting list for land allocations is 1.5 million long, which means that there's huge land hunger in Zimbabwe. And also there is a crisis of homelessness or shortage of accommodation in Zimbabwe. The recent census, the Zimbabwe National Population and Housing Census, revealed that 50% of houses are not owner-occupiers, which means they are lodgers and can be placed in the category of internally displaced people. Since they don't have secure housing, they rely on leases and they have to pay monthly rent, which increases poverty levels in Zimbabwe. So these are the issues that we promote: secure land tenure, enhanced access to land for housing and also for productive purposes. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Admire. Mayor, Admire just set the tone for us. He said in a very polite way that you lead a town of lodgers. Because if someone says 50% of the people in your town, 58% are lodgers, they have no houses. But in the past, council used to provide housing. It used to own houses and list them to its people, and also used to give stands. Now let's start from there before we get deeper into the other issues of demolitions. Let's start there. What is council doing to ensure that people access ownership to houses, access secure tenure? These are words from Admire's mouth. Secure tenure, flowery words, but yeah, let's talk about it.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. I think the house the house situation in Harare is as bad as he says it is, and we need to improve it in a big way. What I can say is that, yes, as council, we still own a big chunk of real estate. We own over 11,000 units of housing that we lease out to an assortment of people who have been our workers, and some have been long-standing tenants. And these houses are littered across town, in town, and the Matapi flats, the Mbare flats are council-owned, and in every suburb, that is the old suburbs, we do have council-owned houses that are still being leased. We are working on a way to make the people who have been leasing them for long to become the owners of those places. But other houses like the flats like Matapi and so forth, they obviously need refurbishment and renewal and a new design before we can go to the ownership model.
So just to stop your thought there, Mayor. Just after the 2018 general elections, the Vice President of Zimbabwe, Constantino Gouveia Chiwenga, addressing people in Mbare, said that they were going to renovate houses in Mbare, put swimming pools there and stuff like that. Maybe you could. And we also had a number of vouchers. We had people who were saying that they were renovating those places and they were making them habitable and secure for the people who stay there. And for us at the Community Alliance for Human Settlements in Zimbabwe, we were worried about the conditions of the houses there in Mbare Matapi. We are worried about the fact that sewer flows freely into people's homes. And we can't say that, for instance, people are securely settled in those places.
Yeah, it's a big issue, and it needs the cooperation of both the municipality and government to be able to bring those places to a habitable status. Well, we would all love to have swimming pools at our houses, but the priority at the moment is just to make those houses livable. If we make them livable, clean, not have sewer, be able to get water, and get people to live in a manner that is organized and have a clean environment, then we would have scored a plus. What we need is to put a concentrated effort to find a sustainable funding model that will fund the rehabilitation of those. Remember, Bill Gates at some time offered to renovate those flats. We ended up building in Zvarasekwa over 500 units of houses because at that time there was a vigilante group called Chipangano, which vigorously and violently rejected the sprucing up of those flats. But we had gotten a grant of about $5 million as the city to revamp, modernize, and create a model, modern community which was revamped. But I think the political environment now is different. If the vice president could go there and promise those things, I'm sure once we get funding to be able to revitalize, we will not get the same resistance that we got at that last time. And the vigilante group has since disbanded, from what I understand. There are still some challenges in Mbare of land barons, political overlords that are still trying to recreate and reenact the activities of that vigilante group, but that needs to be dealt with as quickly as possible. So what we need to do in the short term and the long run is to look at the housing model. We used to build houses. It's an anomaly to give residents a piece of land without a house. What you are supposed to do is, in other countries, people get keys. If you need a house, you go either to council or to a bank, you meet certain conditions, you come back with a key. In Zimbabwe, we give you a piece of land and you spend a lot of years trying to build a house for yourself. And by the time you finish building that house, your children are already grown, you no longer need it. You start building a 4-bedroom house saying you've got 3 or 4 children. By the time you finish it, all of those have gone to university and that house becomes empty, you end up leasing it to other people. What we need to do is to create a regime and to bring back funding from council and government and from banks and building society and pension funds. And once we bring back that, we give them pieces of land where we build a lot of units. I see now it's happening. ZBS is following that model. FBC is following that model. We need to support those initiatives and create a fund, and we need to resuscitate the pension funds so that we can build at one go and give people keys and not give them pieces of land where they spend different times trying to build on those pieces of land. But you know, that idea of invading land began in the days of madness of Chombo and Kasukwere, where at every election time they will unleash hordes of people onto pieces of land indiscriminately, whether it's private, council or state land, on the basis that they needed a vote. And then they will then take the IDs, register those people, and create a voter base. Now biometric registration of voters brought an end to that, because a person has to go individually and get taken his face and the biometrics taken. So there's no large scale voter registration of people, but it's now individually based. So there's no longer a political dividend in pushing hordes of people onto pieces of land. But if we do that funding model, we'll then be able to go back to a situation where we can give housing, affordable housing to the people, where they can pay over time. So it brings the question, what do we do with the informality that is now there? You know, we've got huge estates like Caledonia. People are there. They are sitting on 2,500 hectares. You've got huge estates in Harare South. People are there. You've got Nyatsime. People are there. You've got White House. People are there. What do you do with all these households where they are over? It's almost close to 1 million people who have informally stated in and around the environments of Harare. So what we are going to do as the city of Harare, I'm going to appoint, we have already made a resolution that we will regularize the settlements that can be regularized. We will only not regularize if a person is on a wetland, if a person is on a school site, on a clinic site, on a shopping site, on a primary school site, on a hospital site. Those they will have to find alternative housing elsewhere. So we are going to appoint a commission also to bring title deeds, to see how we can give title deeds in the long run to the people, so that at least funders can have an assurance that there will be collateral and that their money will be brought back should they invest in the housing. But what we need at the present moment is to regularize some of these informal settlements, so that we bring them into the mainstream. We offer services, we can give them water, we can do roads, we can do clinics, we can do schools, we can do industrial strengths, we can do shops, and so forth. And we are going to talk to developers around Harare. One of the challenges that Harare does not have a defined boundary. Harare is the remnants of what remains after someone has drawn the provinces around Harare. We have been talking to the Ministry of Local Government that we must have a defined boundary for Harare, which caters for the area that is vacant and the areas around Harare. So the lack of drawing a defined boundary for Harare has meant that other districts are planning for Harare. So Jimba will build houses at its edges, claiming that it's building in Jimba when people want services for Harare. So Nyatsime will build across, saying it's building for what is their local authority?
Beatrice.
No,
Manyami.
Manyami. They'll say they are building for Manyami, yet they are building at the boundary of Harare. It's the same. So we have municipalities, but those people come and get services for from Harare. They use Harare roads, they use Harare clinics, they come to work in Harare, and they also take most of the things that they need, but they don't pay a single cent. So that's, and water, they get it from Harare, but they don't pay a single cent to Harare. They pay the nominal fees to Nyatsime, Jimba, to the extent that all those districts around Harare, ironically, have now offices in Harare, what they are calling satellite offices, where they collect money because their people do not live where they say they are living. They have to build offices in Harare, and that's putting pressure on the residents of Harare, or the ratepayers of Harare. I have a database of 500,000 ratepayers. Those are the ones that are then getting all the pressure to pay rates, and we have been punishing them by just increasing their rates to cater for the services that we are giving to people who are paying elsewhere. So we would call upon local government to do its job, draw the boundaries of Harare. Those that need to be brought into Harare are brought into Harare, so that they can start paying like the other ratepayers, and we can start charging them rates that are commensurate to the services that they are taking. We can then also regularize their housing, standardize their housing, and get a bit more vacant land, a bit more vacant farms, so that we can build model houses for Harare. Harare, as a metropolitan province, is going to grow, and unfortunately for now it has been growing horizontally. We are also going to make it grow vertically. Harare is too short like its mayor. If I can see the roofs of buildings, then we have a challenge. It has to be a tall city. We can't have, where we are here, Chinhoyi Street. It's in the middle of town. There's no tall building there. They are single-story buildings. We can't not have that. Then we also have to multi-purpose our buildings. We have buildings that are uni-purpose. It's for offices from the 6th floor to the bottom. The world has moved from use of buildings. They use them as multiplex. So if you are looking at Joiner City, it should be a multiplex with residential condos at the top, like the famous Trump Tower. He lives at the top. At the bottom there is a hotel. At the bottom there are gyms. At the bottom there are offices. At the bottom there are shops. So you cannot have a town that is uni-purpose, and it has created a transport crisis. We have a town which empties like there's a curfew. Everyone in Harare decides to sleep at the same time. So 5 o'clock gets, everyone rushes out of town as if there's a curfew and we have been invaded. Then 8 o'clock, they rush back into town as if they are going to be receiving prizes. So we cannot have a city that sleeps for 8 hours. Other cities in the world are multi-purpose, and they are able to work 24 hours a day. Ours is a city where if you come from the rural area, you arrive after 5, you are told everyone is going to sleep. They will wake up tomorrow at 8. You cannot develop a city in such a model. And you cannot develop a city where buildings are used for one purpose alone.
Thank you, Mayor. Now, Admire, the biggest issue here around is when I spoke to the Minister of Higher Education, and I also spoke to the government spokesperson around wetlands, they said that government is looking to, one, prosecute barons who illegally settled people there. Number 2, to resettle those who have been displaced. Who are supposed to be displaced because they've been illegally settled. Like the mayor said, they are not going to be able to regularize those who are settled on wetlands. They're not going to be able to regularize those who have been settled where there are future plans for schools or shopping malls. And what is your concern around these issues?
Thank you, Blessed. Our main concern revolves around the fact that there is no plan or agreement or negotiation between the government or the local authorities and affected homeowners who were unfortunately allocated land on top of wetlands or in areas reserved for schools and clinics and other social amenities. We are recommending that government engage those landowners and ensure that there is a relocation plan first, and then compensation for the losses where they have built houses. Because our research reveals that almost half of these people hold some form of letter authorizing them from the local authority concerned, be it in Chitungwiza, be it in Harare or other areas. So they did not just wake up one day and decide that they want to build on top of wetlands. There is this syndicate of land barons who are politically connected people with links to ministers of local government, and they've got these letters of housing cooperative authorizing them to take over land and develop it. But the catch being that they must first develop the land before they start parceling out lands. But that has been ignored, and the norm is that people are being allocated land parceled out of wetlands, allocated vacant state land, allocated vacant council land, or land reserved for social amenities such as schools, clinics and hospitals. So what we are advising government is it must engage these people and try to find an amicable solution rather than precipitating a humanitarian crisis. Because if they were to move in and make good their threat that all houses built on wetlands or built illegally without permission are going to be demolished, we are going to have another humanitarian crisis in Zimbabwe similar to Operation Murambachina of 2005, or even worse, because PDC Muguti, the Provincial Development Coordinator Muguti, agreed that he actually announced that there are 50,000 illegal houses or households in Harare Metropolitan Province, and 25,000 of them are in Chitungwiza, which makes it a hotspot. But these people, they are residing in what we call peri-urban informal settlements, areas like Nyatsime, like Hopley, like Harare South, like Stone Ridge, and also some areas in Epworth. So if government is to move in and use the security forces to demolish the houses and forcibly evict them, it will be a humanitarian crisis that will not reflect well on the image of the nation. Actually, to display that we have failed to govern ourselves as a majority government since 1980.
Mayor, you failed to govern ourselves since a majority government. I mean, you guys, Harare City Council has over the past few years, in fact, when the short mayor became the mayor, of demolishing people's houses. We have seen massive demolitions of people's stalls in Mbari and Pedzamnamo. I mean, why is this mayor associated or accused of demolishing people's houses and denying them stability in their life?
I don't demolish, or nor do I give anyone an order to demolish houses. I believe that we need to have a social contract with our people, and I believe that if you say move because there is need to a school, just recently we have regularized the issue of tuck shops. We have said people can come and get licenses for holding their tuck shops. We want to do the Spaza model, in like the one in South Africa and Joburg, where these licenses will have, these tuck shops will have licenses, because people have spread out and they are in areas that are far away from shops. What we have said is that we should have a standard hygienic design of the tuck shops. And also we want to deal with the drug problem that is associated around the tuck shops. So we want to register the tuck shops so that we can deal with the drug pandemic. You will agree with me that these small tuck shops have brought in a new disease which is killing the youth, and that is addiction to crystal meth and other drugs. And this is a highly dangerous addiction. It's a huge disease, and it has decimated the focus of the youth. And if we allow unregistered tuck shops to proliferate, we are going to have a crime crisis and a rehabilitation crisis and an overload on our health systems. Right now, we do not even have rehabilitation centers. mothers and fathers are surrendering their children voluntarily to Chikurubi or any prison nearest to them to try and rehabilitate violent drug addicts that are in the midst. The drug addict will steal everything. You'll wake up, he has stolen the window pane, even the door to the house, you'll find that it has been stolen. And some of them are even stealing roofs, whereas the parents are sleeping inside the house. And they can be extremely violent. So as a city and probably as a country, we cannot watch this happening. We need to mix strong measures and other measures that he is talking about in terms of community consensus. But everyone is agreed that the drug menace has become top of the concern of parents and top of the resistance to these many proliferation tuck shops. Because at the end of the day, you will find someone pretending to be selling 15 chocolates seated there, but they are not selling chocolates, they are selling drugs. Those chocolates never get bought and they never finish, but the person is there saying that they have a tuck shop. And surely, as a nation and as a city, we cannot allow that to happen. But those that have genuine businesses, we will give licenses and make sure that they don't mix their genuine business with the issue of drugs that I'm talking about. And I have said earlier, we are going to regularize. We have stopped dealing with cooperatives as a city. We deal with the individual who is on the piece of land one by one. You are the one who comes and have a contract with us as a city if you are on council land. If you are on
but Mayor, let me just stop you there and say, we've seen demolitions. We've seen demolitions.
But when
we've seen demolitions in Budiriro. We have seen demolitions in Bari, especially the vending stalls. At one point, the whole Bari was cordoned off by police. And we saw a number of people losing their wares.
Yeah, but
and we saw your council police officers being part of those operations.
Yeah, but in the latest, when I came back.
Back from where?
From suspension and other related persecutions and jail. I have not authorized any destruction of a home or authorized any destruction of a tuck shop. What happened in Bari is that two groups started fighting. You will confirm. Two groups started fighting, youth, and these are space barons, and they started fighting and they started burning each other stalls. When they were burning each other's stalls, there was danger to life and limb. And that is when it became a security operation, and not at council level, but at the provincial joke level, where people's properties were being burnt. It was not a council operation. We were in the middle of trying to engage NASA and other investors so that we could build a multiplex at Mpedzanamo and the Chishawasha grounds. We were trying to persuade NASA to invest in a modern marketing facility, which will then be used by by many of these informal traders, and segment it. We have fresh vegetable site, clothing site, and electric well site, and so forth, all the range of goods that are being sold there. We're trying to persuade NASA, and we are still, we've signed a memorandum we've authorized the signing of a memorandum of understanding with them so that they can develop such a facility. When we were in the middle of that, then there was a conflagration, an eruption, as it were, or an orgy of violence sponsored by greed and space barons. And that violence then created a situation where the security had to step in. But we didn't burn anyone's stall, we didn't confiscate anyone's goods, and we stepped in to stop.
But Mayor, you can't honestly say you don't confiscate anyone's goods.
No, we didn't at that time.
At that time, but you continue to confiscate people's goods in the streets, on the streets of Harare, with your council police officers.
Yes, if you look at my addresses, I've said that we have to deconstruct the colonial state. That is the extractive state, whereby we use force as a way of developing a consensus. What we need to do is to create a consensus with the informal traders, like what he said, and the informal settlers, and say, and we have the tools. Like, for example, in Caledonia, we have set up a three-member board made up of 5 councillors from Harare, 5 councillors from Goromonzi, 5 councillors from Rua, to deal with the setting up of a town board and to regularize, come up with a budget, create offices, and to start deformalizing Caledonia. So we have the tools in our laws, in the Urban Councils Act, and many of our laws, to be able to create platforms of dialogue. So what we need to do now with the informal sector is to create these platforms of dialogue in the first instance, create a regime where they can operate, areas where they can operate, how we fund, if we extract money, how much of it do we give back to building their facilities, how much of it goes to council for administrative purposes, so that we create a situation where their operating environment can be conducive. And then we designate the areas in and around town where they can operate from. And then, like I said, what we want to avoid is the chaos that ensues if there is no government. So, like I said, the whole town sleeps at 5, and that is when the informal traders are coming into town, and they spread over the whole town. And when you come back tomorrow, you'll find the town is dirty, the town has had a lot of activities, and so forth. So what we're trying to do is we're going to create a 24-hour city and put our workers in shifts and come to an agreement as to the areas where the informal traders can operate, how they operate, the hygienic standards, and we then move on. We cannot use the road all the time. It has not succeeded up to this point, and I dare say it will not succeed. The consensus model is talking about creating the platforms of engagement and then self-policing. It's, for example, I'll give you an example of the commuter omnibuses in Bulawayo. They're very informal, but they self-police. They self-police, they protect the passengers, they protect their routes. If you lose something in the combi, you will find it. They make sure that their termini are clean. They make sure that there is no chaos, and they have a healthy relationship with council. It's only in Harare where sometimes people believe in a Royal Rumble kind of governance and no self-governance at all. Everyone wants to get in at a traffic light. There is chaos. If it rains, the driving etiquette does not work. The combis are driving as if they are going they are in a race, and so forth. So we need to find a way of creating regulatory frameworks that include both self-regulation and enforcement at the end of the day.
Admire, you speak about zero. You speak about a zero, an operation zero. And I spoke to the minister. I think we're just going to have a small listen to the minister saying that there is political will to deal with Operation Zero. So land barons are going to be arrested, they are going to be charged. Government has already set a committee to deal with these things. And compensation is going to be there for those who were swindled of their money, and alternative land is going to be provided. Now, we just want to listen a bit to what the minister said. I just wanted to find out from you, Minister, what has been the effect of people settling on wetlands to Zimbabwe?
What I can only say is that the water resources of any country are concentrated on its rivers and underground. That's why it was so important for the committee and the Zimbabwe National Geospatial and Space Agency to map out the areas of all the wetlands in Zimbabwe, every square centimeter, So in the meantime, the next issue is for EMA. They were working with ZINGSA, they are still working with ZINGSA, to then superimpose the settlements and the land use patterns that are existing onto the wetlands layer, so that there can be a comprehensive analysis of the impact of land use on these wetlands. But what has actually been happening is that the Environmental Management Agency with Minister Mangaliso Ndlovu are now in the process of actually doing the actual assessment and the rehabilitation, as the Honorable Acting Minister of Information was saying. They are working bit by bit for Harare, Chitungwiza, and so forth and so on, so that there is rehabilitation of those ones which have been damaged. But in terms of overall assessment, it's now possible because we have done the maps and we have done the land use, so it's just time for analysis. So in actual fact, human settlements, if they are not properly planned, they can have a very negative impact on the on what I call the water resources of the country. And you know, water is the lifeblood of the earth.
But is there serious political will to deal with this? Because we know that in the past, people were settled rather on these wetlands through political, allegiance and stuff like that. Is there political will right now to deal with these settlements on wetlands?
I think that's why we are discussing about it in cabinet, and that's why there's a post-cabinet briefing about it. It shows that we are very serious about it. It's for the first time, His Excellency President Dr. Mnangagwa, he has ordered the mapping of all the wetlands in Zimbabwe. It has never happened. It has happened now. So that means it's a statement of seriousness towards what we want to do as a country.
Admire, with what the minister has just said, do you have confidence that government is serious about Operation Zero and that the issues that the minister talks about are going to be addressed?
Thank you very much, Blessed. As the Community Alliance for Human Settlements, which is representing various informal communities and informal traders across Zimbabwe, we are happy that government is on record promising to avail all those promises that is made. But we are concerned to note that there's a huge gap or mismatch between government policy and what is practically obtaining on the ground. We have not seen that political will and determinedness to address the problems associated with informal housing and land barons and homeless people, especially within Harare Metropolitan Province. Government has always made these promises that it's dealing with informal barons. It even appointed various commissions to probe this issue, and the results have consistently pointed to politically connected people, big men who act as land barons and parcel out land and fail to offer requisite on-site services like roads, clinics, and schools. So we are calling for government to be serious and demonstrate political will and actually do something on the ground. We welcome reports that around 460 land barons have been identified and are in the process of being arrested. But also ask the government to go further and seek to make sure that people who were duped by these land barons, who paid money to access housing state from these land barons, are actually compensated or recover their money which was lost, and also ensure that these people are, I would say, evicted in a humane manner rather than adopt violence like has been the norm, where government moves in suddenly without warning one day and with bulldozers and starts demolishing houses which are housing families, including children who are innocent. It creates a needless human suffering, a humanitarian crisis, and it paints Zimbabwe as a nation in bad light. when house demolitions took place. So we are calling on government to create a clear, very transparent relocation plan and dedicate land, and also engage these people to say that you are moving from this side to this side, and you will be compensated for the monies you lost. I think the present situation where government surreptitiously announces operations zero tolerance to environmental crimes and promises that houses built on wetlands and land reserved for social services will be demolished, and it ends there without saying that after demolition these people will be moved to such and such a place
Or before.
or before. Yeah, it's actually before demolitions. These people need to be moved before, so that when government moves in with graders, those houses will be empty. They will have been stripped of valuable building material like door frames, window frames, or even roofing for reuse in building where they have been allocated.
Yeah.
Without
So
that, we are very much concerned because it creates so much emotional trauma for those people. They are actually under huge psychological pressure. Imagine if the situation when you hear that the government is its mighty, its soldiers, police and intelligence is going to move in and destroy your house where you are living with your family and you don't have an alternative. So it's a huge psychological suffering that it is visiting on people who are residing on houses built on wetlands.
I heard the mayor speaking up over a number of issues, a number of interventions that Harare City Council wants to do. Are you convinced by the mayor's proposals?
Yes, I'm convinced. The mayor is demonstrating political will. But like I said, there's always a mismatch between council's position and what will be actually happening on the ground. We don't see that complementarity between the central government through the land ministry, which is the Ministry of Local Government, and the city of Harare and other local authorities in Harare Metropolitan Province like Chitungwiza and Epworth Local Board. We want to see government, central government, working hand in glove with the local authority, making the same pronouncements and backing each other so that we can see that they are working together to improve the lot of people without access to housing stands.
Now, Mayor, I'm hoping that you've got these statistics. To what extent is the illegal settlement in Harare, especially on wetlands? Because Minister Murwira says that water sources in Zimbabwe, in Harare and other towns are actually threatened seriously by illegal settlements on wetlands.
Yeah, it's a huge percentage. I don't have the statistics, so to speak, but you must remember that Harare was built on its own water source. So the whole of Harare is basically a wetland, some wetter than others. I think at the time it was constructed, it made sense to be closer to water sources so that people could drink without having to go very far. Remember, it was a colonial state. They needed to be on top of their water probably for security reasons. At that time, they needed to be at the source of everything that they needed to use because they basically invaded a land owned by other people, and therefore they needed to say if they were under siege, they would be able to survive without going out of the walls or the fortresses they would have set up. So it's built on Harare is built on a huge wetland, except the mountainous parts of Harare. So what is there for us to do is to map the most vulnerable of the areas and the most critical of the areas. We create a map which says these areas, come what may, will not be destroyed.
But Mayor, you speak about the desire to create a map, but just I'll just go back to what Minister Murwira and just listen a bit, because he says that the geospatial department of the University of Zimbabwe has mapped the wetlands, and they already have this map. You're the Harare mayor, you don't know about this.
There are a number of maps, you will confirm. If the Harare, what we need is to have a uniform map. There's a Ramsar sites, there's that geo map, there's the map from the EMA, there's map from the city of Harare, and so forth. Then there was a need to have a one combined Harare master plan that then maps everything and how we are going to develop. And all these things are in various stages of development. So one can't talk about a singular map. You can talk about a preferred map, but there are a number of maps. So what's needed to be done is for those maps to be synchronized so that we come to an agreement across all stakeholders that this is the map we are using. And once we get the map that we are using, we lock it either by law or either by resolution of council and say in these areas, the moment a settlement comes or a permit is sought to build something, it will not be agreed to. So that we don't have local government saying one thing, EMA saying one thing, council saying one thing, and the private owner saying another thing. So remember, these wetlands can be on your private land. It can be on state land. It can be on council land. Okay? So, if you are a private player, sometimes you have resistance from that private player saying, no, I bought this land, and what I need is I need to build cluster homes there. It's like the Manresa wetland. The owner of that portion of that wants to create cluster homes, and it's been taken to court and back not to do that. But it's a privately owned land. You've got state land like Sherwood Golf Club. Repeatedly, the ministry plans to build houses in it. You'll find there is one local government itself has got houses that it has planned in that. And we as council are the ones who stop the people to say, no, but this is a wetland. What's happening? Who is planning on this wetland? But the Ministry of Local Government will be claiming, look, we're the custodian of state land. And we've said, let there be stands and so forth. So it is that, and then you have council land sometimes where the council itself also says, we are planning this and that on this piece of land. So we need a supra or a both stakeholders map which agrees whether it's private land, whether it's state land, whether it's council land. If it's a wetland, these are the activities that can be done, whether a bird sanctuary, recreational, tree planting, because there are other activities that you can do on a wetland. You can create sanctuaries, you can do recreation, the braais and so forth, that are not intensive. You can make it a place where people visit, a park, do environmental friendly businesses that do not destroy the essence of the wetland. Actually, maybe at times enhance the essence of the wetlands. And we as city council have cordoned off Mukuvisi woodlands, a piece of land which is 276 hectares big, where if you go in there, you think you have gone into the Serengeti in Tanzania. It's a savanna plain in the middle of the city. We are one of the few cities in the world that has a forest in the middle of the city. You go in there, you'll see giraffes, all sorts of animals, grasslands, birds, and so forth. Kudus, blah, 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 blah. You would think you've gone and stumbled into Wange Safari Lodge. And this is smack in the middle of the city where we have reclaimed wetland, because it used to be a quarry, it used to be a car racing before we moved the races to Donnybrook and so forth. It used to be a concrete jungle. But as the city of Harare, we decided to protect that wetland, and it's a beautiful wetland. I've just extended their lease. The trust that operates there, it's the only lease that I will extend for 70 years, because we want that land to be a wetland and to be preserved for the next 70 years.
But Haka Game Park is one such amazing place as well.
Yes, Haka is a lake, and Haka, they have a lease, I'm sure, which is 35 years. All the green places, this mayor will protect them. I will not give long leases to the hungry capitalists and to those that want to exploit the residents of Harare. But to those that want to keep the wetlands, that want to keep our lakes, that wants to make it beautiful, we want to create a unique city. And you must remember, we have so many golf clubs. I have over 30 golf clubs that are basically greenlands. We have more golf clubs in the city of Harare than almost any other city in Africa, I dare say the world. And we have kept those as green places. They are bigger pieces of land. Most of them go to from 50 hectares to 75 hectares. And the only things that are in those places are grass and little rivers, and people play little balls there, and they are very serene and lovely, except for the ones that have not been kept by the club members. But we are going to look at the clubs that are there, give it to people who can keep the environment as it is. And that is why we are refusing to give permits to people who want to make golf clubs into something else that they are not into, industrial stands or commercial stands and so forth. We will not do that, or it will happen after I leave office. When I'm in office, we are going to keep the greenlands. We're going to keep the wetlands. We're going to enhance the quality, and we're going to create a unique city that is eco-friendly, that you can walk from one place to another, be in a concrete jungle 1 minute, and be looking at giraffes and zebras the other minute.
Amazing. I'm just unfortunately I'm running out of time, but I want to give you an opportunity to have to put your summations, your conclusions from the discussions that we've had here, and also from the position of government. I see you taking a bit of some notes, so I'll allow you to go through your notes as you give us your conclusion. Because here with our partners, we strongly believe that people in Zimbabwe must be given an opportunity for secure tenure. We must be able to protect our wetlands and ensure that the life of this community and the future of our grandchildren and our children is protected. Now, you can't have a city without water. You can't have a city of 58% lodgers. You can't have a city where poverty is at the center of a city. I mean, if you go to other places in the world, for instance, you go to South Africa's Johannesburg, you'd find the most richest people in Johannesburg, in Cape Town. If you go to Kenya, in Nairobi, you'll find amazing homes in the city. We've got to preserve that if we are going to build a better Zimbabwe. Now, I'll give it to you, Admire, as we speak about this important aspect. In conclusion.
Thank you very much, Blessed. As CAS, we believe that the right to housing is sacrosanct. I think it's an enabling right, because without housing, you cannot talk of access to health or health facilities like clinics. Without housing, you cannot talk of access to schools. You cannot even talk of personal security. So we are urging government, central government, and responsible local ministries, beginning with the city of Harare, the municipality of Chitungiza, Epworth local board, and the rural local board, to prioritize housing and ensure that housing is prioritized wherever there is budgeting. Funds must be set aside for the development of human settlements that are fit for purpose, that offer dignity and security to the people. So we are urging all the responsible local authorities to facilitate easier access to land for housing. And we are realizing that the market for land prices out the poor. I would ask the mayor, how much is the cheapest housing state going for in Harare? on the open market, you realize that you are talking of something like 8 to 10,000 US dollars, which is out of reach of the majority who lack access to housing. So we are calling for pro-poor policies. We are calling for social housing, for our policies that promote the right to housing for poor people. And I would also urge the city of Harare and also municipality of Chitungiza to revisit the housing policy, which depends on the waiting list. Evidently, the housing waiting list is not delivering. If we were to look back for over the last 20 years, how many people have benefited through the housing waiting list, who paid to join the housing waiting list and were eventually allocated housing stands or houses. That number is very minuscule, it's very small. You could realize also that if we were to look for the past 20 years, the number of new homeowners who were able to access land and build houses, they did it through this land baron system. So while we condemn it and also reiterate that it's corrupt and it benefits elites, but it has been delivering housing, though it is failing to deliver security of tenure for the people, and it creates a crisis of anxiety and also psychological pressure like I have talked about. So we are calling on the local authorities to revisit the housing waiting list and provide land for housing to poor people. I think it's a low-hanging fruit because I believe that Harare or Zimbabwe, the rest of Zimbabwe, land is abundant. It's one finite natural resource that we have, especially when we are talking of land for housing people. So I think it's an easy hanging in the low fruit for the city of Harare to start allocating land to people. And then when the people are on site, start collecting money on a monthly basis for the development of on-site infrastructure. Like the, what do they call this model? The rent-to-buy model that was implemented just before independence by the Smith government, which is responsible for the building of most locations like Chitungiza or Glenora, where people were given keys to houses and asked to pay monthly rent, and also part of which will be used for the purchase of the house. And after 25 years, they are proud house owners. So we are calling for them to revisit housing policies and create avenues for marginalized social groups who lack financial muscle to purchase land on the open market.
Amazing. Mayor, I'll ask you your closing remarks as we look at the concerns of your community, of the people that you serve, and especially, Mayor, as we move into 2023, where people are supposed to either renew your mandate or revoke it, as housing and security of tenure, protection of wetlands stands. Mayor Mafume.
Yeah, well, like that, hopefully renew it. What we are going to do, he makes many valid points. What we require is to create a situation where we move away from the cash model, because you cannot provide housing using a cash model. So you've got a redundant waiting list model, then you've got an uneconomically unsustainable model where things are transacted through a cash model. So that increases the informality of these settlements. What you require is to create a situation where people are able to rent to buy. People are able to, if it's not rent to buy, they are able to get loans to be able to purchase. We need to restore a land market in Harare. We need to increase the title deeds that are there, or the route to title deeds. So you'll find that a house in Glenora almost costs the same as a flat in Central South Africa, simply because those houses have title deeds. So what we need to do to kickstart the economy of Harare and to also help people is to put title deeds. So I'm going to put a commission for title deeds in our next council. I'll announce a commission which will see how we can put the number of houses that are being regularized on a path to getting title deeds. So I'll get experts so that we get a program on how we are going to do it. So that will deal with the houses that we are regularizing and those where people are staying and they don't have title deeds. What's the quickest route? Because once we get to title deeds, then those areas can be developed by building societies and so forth. We're going to ask to more from developers that are organized like ZBS, like FBC, to create houses and probably give them more land so that they are able to build units in quick time that can be habitable by the people and that have standards and that are ready to use when they are made. For those that want stands, I think we need to create stands that have title and so forth. A house is not only required for living in, it's also needed to start small to medium enterprises, education loans, and many other loans that one is supposed to get. Then lastly, we need to continue the role of building houses for the community that councils all over the world have to do. We have to revitalize the Mbare estates. We have to build more estates. We have to make our towers higher. We can no longer sustain housing with 3-story towers. We need to make a rule that we start having 10-story towers. We need to densify because some people need to be close to town, need to work closer to town. So our towers are not that long. So we will need to put on towers. So we will look at our regulatory framework, look at the economic incentives that we can give, and we will revamp our housing policy so that we are able to create. And we have also started densifying. That's why we are approving cluster homes in areas. We are now going to get rid of colonial yards that were huge so that people are able to stay more at an area so that we can give them services. But I quite agree with my colleague here that we need to decolonialize our housing policy. We need to make it more adaptable to current norms of a developing African smart city. And then we will be able to do. And then we need a transport system. Lastly, one of the issues that is killing and that's making everyone want to accumulate closer to Harare is our weak transportation system. People could, if we had a train system that was working, people could live as far as Chegutu, as far as Chinhoyi, as far as Marondera, which they do, but more people could have housing estates being built there as long as we had a quick way to bring them to Harare and a quick way to get them to where they are staying. So we will create a transport master plan that will then decongest Harare in terms of reducing the times that one is traveling in and out of Harare.
Thank you very much, Mayor. The Mayor of Harare is Worship Councillor Jacob Mafume, and my partner today, the Community Alliance for Human Settlements in Zimbabwe, Admire Mtize, who is the Research and Advocacy Officer on this, the situation right now with me, your host as usual, Dara B. Now, housing is a serious issue. It's something that we all need to take to make sure that we put attention to, you know. Unlike in other developed states and nations where when people get older, they sell their homes, you know, and they move into old people's homes and stuff like that. Africans have this affinity to holding title, to holding ownership of home. We have seen in other instances where when a tenant actually passes on, the landlord will refuse to have a funeral at their home. They'll say Musiamvuri or some other issue like that. So it becomes very important in our African culture, in our African perspective, to ensure that we give people an opportunity to own land and to be landlords, so to speak. We were discussing here with admire and His Worship the Mayor Jacob Mafume on what we need to expect in the city of Harare, the Harare Metropolitan Province. If the provincial councils work, the mayor is supposed to be the chief of the Harare Metropolitan Province, and supposed to ensure that he looks at all other, local authorities that feed into Harare Metropolitan Province. So the view of Harare City Council around this issue of housing, around this issue of wetlands and illegal settlements is very, very important. Now, join us in our next episode on this, the situation right now, and thanking our partners for joining us to make you aware of your housing rights. Thank you very much, Admire. Thank you very much, His Worship the Mayor of Harare, and thank you very much to the government Minister of Higher and Education, Tertiary Education, Amon Murwira, and the acting government spokesperson at the moment, Jenfen Muswera. Now, this is me, Dara B, signing out. Thank you very much to our viewers.